Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. This video is about the paucity of teachers in the United Kingdom. And there have been more and more reports in the media over the past couple of weeks about how the shortage of teachers in the United Kingdom is severe. And it looks like it's going to get worse. And I know the statistics are collected separately for Northern Ireland, England, Scotland. I think Wales goes along with England for this. But Northern Ireland situation is not too bad actually, but Scotland and England, it certainly is acute. And we'll look at England in particular because that's got over 80% of the United Kingdom's population. And for the past 6 years, the recruitment targets have been missed. The government has set itself a target to recruit whatever X number of teachers. And when the situation was already somewhat bad 6 years ago, you can see just how dreadful it is. Now, there's also some natural wastage, as in people retire, occasionally drop dead, or get kicked out of the profession. And I'll come on to that later. So they've been trying to attract people in particularly poorly served subjects with a golden hello. Now, the government has a recruitment target for each subject in England. So people with a degree, or sometimes they do a degree in teaching, particularly as primary teaching, but people with a degree in some other mainstream subject like history, biology, French, Spanish, English, maths, whatever, school subjects, are then able to go on to a PGCE, postgraduate certificate of education. You can do one on the job and then get QTS, qualified teaching status. There are various ways to do it. So do a PGCE for 1 year, which is some theory, some lectures in university, going into a school, observing some lessons, teaching your lessons under observation, then teaching them without observation, blah, 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 and paperwork right up to your chin. Right, what else can I say? And then you're teaching for a further year when you're supervised a bit, and if that's successful, then you get QTS, qualified teaching status. And the government's just made it more and more difficult to be a teacher, piling more and more regulation and inspections and blah, blah, blah. No wonder nobody wants to do it. And I used to have this absolute drivel from Michael Gove when he was Education Secretary saying it should be a master's degree occupation. You're lucky to get people with bachelor's degrees to do it. Why on earth would you get people with master's degrees to do it? You don't need to be an outstanding intellectual to do it, particularly at primary level. If you're too clever, it's actually bad, because then you're understimulated by it. We don't want people who are geniuses teaching at too high a level. And this is the trouble I had when I was at school, because almost all the beaks, as we used to call them, teachers, had been to Oxford or Cambridge. A lot of them had first-class degrees, some of them had doctorates. So these were men, and occasionally women, of outstanding academic ability. And there's some merits to that. But the trouble is they're teaching an average ability pupil, or even a below average ability. They're pitching it too high. And these people are feeling unfulfilled. They find it difficult to simplify. They can't understand why we don't understand. So that would be bad news. These people would be better off as academics because they're too scholarly. Anyway, so in history, the government is reaching its targets, and it was reaching 160% of the target. So recruiting a lot more history teachers than they need. Because once you get a PGCE, you can teach anything. You're supposed to teach your main subject, history if you've got a degree in that, but they might let you teach things which are similar, like geography or politics, a bit related. Sometimes they had such a shortage of teachers, they'd let these history teachers teach maths or something, biology, because it's better than not being taught at all. What you're going to do, you have to teach the subject. They might not teach it to A level, might teach it to GCSE or even below that. Remember, A level, that's advanced level. That's what people do the last 2 years of school in England. Now, other subjects, obviously, they were under the 100% figure. And bear in mind, even if you recruit people, some of them are going to leave the profession after a couple of years because it's just so immensely difficult, because it's about being publicly humiliated, insulted all the time, being interrupted 100 times a day easily, loads of disciplinary issues, as I say, filling out stacks and stacks of paperwork which are no use to anyone. It's about being the police, it's about being sworn at, and all the rest of it. And then nothing is done about people who are so grossly insulting to you. You're trying to help these pupils and they're fighting against you. So, but the subjects where the government really fell short in recruiting teachers were physics, chemistry, mathematics, and information technology. Information technology is sometimes called computer science. So in those subjects, they were recruiting about 60% of the target, which is shocking. So you may know in the United Kingdom, when you get a degree, it's given a class degree. There's a first class degree, the top say 15% roughly get that. They're outstanding. Loads of people get 2-1s. Almost 50% of people get a 2-1. And that's very good. Below that is a 2-2, which is good. And, perhaps 30% of people would get that. And below that is a third class degree, and maybe 10% of people would get that. There is such a thing as a pass degree. It's not an honours degree. A pass, you've just passed, and usually you can't go on to do any more. You can't go on to do any more qualifications after that, but that's very rare. Anyway, so the government was saying, I remember they're saying, we're going to have to say you have to get 2-1 or above. Well, what a moronic thing to do. If you have almost no physics or chemistry teachers to do it. So we don't have enough people reading science subjects at universities anyway, and people who've done anything which is mathematically allied are snapped up by the private sector. They can do these handsomely rewarded jobs in financial services. So it's very lucrative if you're in IT as well. So suppose you got a degree in IT, in maths, in physics, something like that. Why would you be a teacher? You might want to, and some of them are brilliant. Or you might be so dreadful that you can't get a job doing anything else, and you've got a third-class degree. Remember, there are about 120 universities in the United Kingdom, some of which are world-class, like Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, and plenty of which are solid, which are very good, right down to mediocre, down to which are dreadful. You could fail all your A-levels. I really do mean fail them, get U grades, and some of them would take you anyway. So to say a 2-1 is a very blunt instrument. A third-class degree from Oxford or Imperial, that's better than a first from some of the absolutely dreadful ones, which would take just about anyone. So it was a completely stupid policy and it hasn't been implemented, fortunately. And what would you do? If you had that policy, you had to have a 2-1 or above, you wouldn't be meeting 60% of your recruitment target for physics, you'd be reading about 30% of it. Anyway, so loads of people drop out, leave teaching after a few years, and you can't blame them. Because if it's that difficult, if you're going to be insulted all the time, if you're going to have to fill out absolute reams of paperwork which are completely futile, it's not surprising people leave. People go into it because they like the subject, they want to enthuse other people, they want to be inspiring. And, some people will have a positive memory of me for the rest of their lives. I had a positive impact on them. Some people obviously think I'm dreadful, the most evil man in the world, so cruel, so unreasonable, stupid and unfair and all the rest of it. So I've got to have the right personality. I'm a bit too hit and miss, a bit polarizing. You shouldn't be a Marmite person. But the salary is obviously not high enough. Now, it's never been a lucrative occupation, but it needs to be a bit more so. Like in London, there's this London waiting extra salary, about 25% extra, but it's nowhere near enough. It would have to be 100% extra, and I really mean that, to reflect the cost of housing. So the other thing is not too difficult to recruit teachers in certain areas, like in Yorkshire, in pleasant areas of Yorkshire, where the cost of living is much lower. But in sink estate areas, as I say, areas with very low incomes, mass unemployment, blah, 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 it is very difficult to recruit people because even though the cost of living is low, often there are some severe problems in the schools. Not that the children are bad per se, it's not their fault, they grew up in difficult circumstances, but that tends to lead to bad behaviour and underachievement. So there's so much exam stress, and it's your fault as a teacher they don't do well. Even these people who are 18, not to be taking responsibility. They think they're adults, all right, you take responsibility. They do their coursework, it's all landed on the teacher's door. Whatever happened, it's always the teacher to blame. Now, I know the teacher has to take some responsibility, but by the time the pupils are almost grown up, it's got to be a shared responsibility between the pupil, the teacher, and the parents. And obviously, the older the pupils are, the more and more responsibility is on them, and less is on the teacher. If the child is 4 years old, that's a different story. So loads of complaints, most of them unreasonable. You can be accused of anything, of racism, of whatever, sexism, of sex crimes, blah, blah, blah. And even if the teacher is completely exonerated and the accusation is proved to be 100% bogus, obviously that's never wiped, that's never forgotten, and there's no comeback, and the pupil is never penalised. And you can't take action against parents who publicise this so long as they supposedly publicised it in good faith. So the person's reputation is trashed, and people can be suspended for 6 months. There was a deputy headmaster. He put his hand on the girl's back or something when she's been very, very badly behaved, trying to persuade her to leave a room, and she accused him of molesting him. It was witnessed by scores of people, and he was suspended for 6 months before the whole thing was cleared up and he could go on. So he was on gardening leave. So imagine the stress of that. And so who would do it? Who would subject themselves to this? Or I know a teacher in London who was punched in the face by a boy for suggesting he shouldn't skip the lunch queue, and the boy was suspended for 3 days. Or even pregnant teachers who've been assaulted and things like that. And there's this new type of child abuse called emotional harm, which is sort of criticising them. I remember seeing a deputy headmaster years ago when two boys were behaving very badly, calling them idiots. And these days that's emotional harm, even if they're 18-year-old bruisers. Oh, you've hurt their feeling, they're crying now. They can't be at all robust. Anyway, people are drowning in regulations. Changes the curriculum are announced, then they're not implemented, then they do change things back to what they did several years ago. There's loads of non-teaching tasks which teachers have to do, like more or less being the police for the pupils. And people can be barred on the slightest pretext. And it goes to the vetting and independent safeguarding service. And they can be barred from working for minors for life. That's not just working, even volunteering, doing stuff for free, being with the scouts, coaching a sport, if you're accused of something or other. Notice, you don't have to be accused of a crime. It could be sexual behaviour towards a pupil. What's that if it's not an actual crime? Or it could be being racist to them or helping them cheat in exams. And it doesn't have to be proven. Okay, it only has to be on the whim of one caseworker. They can ban someone from working with minors for life. How about that? The person would be better off at being accused of a crime, because then there would be a judicial process, there'd be a presumption of innocence. But if you're a caseworker, if it comes up that someone, not a teacher necessarily, anyone really, could be a police officer or a doctor or a nurse or a sports coach or any adult, is accused of inappropriate behaviour towards children, which is a very broad catch-all. As a caseworker, what's the safest thing for you to do? The safe thing for you to do for career is just bar the person. Then you can't be criticised. If you don't bar them and they then go on to commit some unspeakable crime, it'll come back on you. Why didn't you bar the person whilst you had the chance? Okay, so just by fiat, just ban this person for life from working or volunteering with minors. So obviously they're banning people on the slightest pretext. I mean, obviously there's some people who are barred who really should be barred, who've committed serious crimes. That's different. Or the people who have been barred for taking drugs in their free time, or for alcoholism. Now, alcoholics often make the best teachers, particularly of English. Not joking either. And so long as it doesn't impact your work, I don't see why that shouldn't be the case. Anyway, they're raising the bar so high, making it so difficult to be a teacher. I'm surprised anybody wants to do it. And I have to admit to feeling a bit of schadenfreude about the sticky situation the government's got itself in. Of course, it's not the pupils' fault, not most of them. Some of them are angelic, are brainy, are very industrious as ever. There's some absolutely fantastic pupils who are an absolute delight to teach. And obviously the majority are, as you would expect, partly good, partly bad, make some kind of an effort, reasonably able, decently behaved. But there's a large minority who are absolutely horrific, or terribly behaved, or grossly insulting, or absolutely bone idle, and they'll have parents to match. Meet the parents often, you see why. So that's that. So my advice to people is just don't teach, don't volunteer with minors. It's terribly sad to have to say this, but it could ruin your life. You might have a dreadful time, extremely stressful. Another thing is teachers from the United Kingdom are very much in demand overseas because people want to learn English. That's a world language. So they want their children to learn English from people from one of the major Anglophone countries, the United States or the United Kingdom or Australia. Those ones they really want their children to end up with one of those sorts of accents. So that's why teachers in the UK are saying, screw this for a game of soldiers. I can go abroad, like the UAE or China or anywhere, and be better paid, and they tend to have much better behaved pupils, and that's that, and far less stress, and we don't have these endless regulations. I mean, even taking people to go debating, to walk a mile down the street to another school, having to fill out a risk assessment. Debating is not a dangerous activity, for goodness sake. How moronic is that? So no wonder people don't want to do it, which is a terrible pity. It used to be a very agreeable lifestyle. And so this is having a negative impact on people's education, obviously, when gifted and able people are not going into teaching. And in the long run, that really hurts the economy because teachers are so degraded and you'll get substandard people doing it. So there we are, often having to work on supply teachers. In London, the system only works because of immigrant teachers. Obviously not saying they're worse by any means, some of them are excellent. But their English isn't always perfect and they don't understand the UK system that well and they're new to the country and there's a bit of a learning curve. Often they become outstanding. But that's that because, as I say, the salary is just nowhere near adequate for someone like London. If it weren't for them, then the London school system would collapse It's another reason why immigration is very necessary in certain sectors. So those are my uncollected thoughts on the teacher recruitment crisis in the United Kingdom.